Hi, this is Little Dwarf playing games while rambling incoherently into a microphone. Why? Well, just because I can, and I continue with Chronicles of Myrtana Archolos, blind. I'm here in the basement of the Water Mage Monastery, and I'm going to try to put this guy to sleep to enter the secret library. Because there's supposed to be some information on Vardhal in here. Yeah, the mastery of the Vardhal armors, Arcanum Marum. Many words of this old chronicle are illegible. I'll just gather everything. Okay, I read that. The catalogue of the mistakes of the followers of Innos, Testament of the Wolf. Arcanum Marum. Arcanum Marum. Now, can I exit without drawing the ire of the guy? Or do I need to put him to sleep again? Okay, I'm not quite sure what happened to him. Damn it, I shouldn't have quick saved because I'm not sure. I think he fell into the texture. So hopefully he'll get better. Or alternatively, hopefully I don't need him for anything.
Co słychać?
Zdaje się, że nie doceniłem tych gryzoni. Jednak będę musiał się nimi jakoś zająć.
I need to look around for someone who needs help of a paladin. So that Kandak has something to do?
Chwila. Czemu tak biegasz?
Czekaj, muszę złapać oddech.
Chwila.
Okay, I take it he's going to rest in a certain place.
Mówię ci, słyszałem tam jakieś odgłosy ostatniej nocy.
Ale skąd tam się wzięły te wszystkie bestie?
Ja nie zamierzam mówić o tym magom. Sprzątanie cmentarza to nasz przydział. I znając ich zasady, to my będziemy mieli przez to kłopoty.
Ciszej, ktoś tu jest.
Czyżbyście mieli jakiś problem?
Nie, nie mamy żadnego problemu. Wszystko jest w doskonałym porządku.
Spójrz na niego. Wygląda, jakby potrafił sobie poradzić z bestią czy dwiema. Może nam jakoś pomoże.
Powiecie mi, co się tutaj dzieje, czy nie?
Dobrze, już dobrze. Mamy problem. I to całkiem spory. Od jakiegoś czasu, praktycznie każdej nocy usłyszeć można dziwne odgłosy pochodzące z cmentarza. Początkowo myśleliśmy, że to może jedynie wiatr czy szum oceanu, ale dzisiaj znaleźliśmy ciała tych bestii porozrzucane między grobami. Jeśli mam być szczery, to nie mam pojęcia, co z tym zrobić. Jesteśmy opiekunami cmentarza, a naszym zadaniem jest dbanie o spokój zmarłych i czystość okolicy.
Mamy jeszcze tylko rok do próby wody. Jeśli magowie uznają, że to nasza wina, to możemy zapomnieć o święceniach w ciągu najbliższej dekady.
Właśnie! Może mógłbyś się zająć sprawieniem, że te ciała znikną i że nie pojawią się już żadne następne?
Nie mamy zbyt wiele, ale z chęcią oddamy ci część naszych zwojów i ksiąg.
Sprawdzę ten cmentarz.
Dziękujemy. wyświadczysz nam wielką przysługę.
Yeah, Kandak might be interested in helping them out.
Znalazłem zadanie dla ciebie.
Doprawdy?
Nowicjusze znaleźli jakieś martwe bestie na cmentarzu.
Chłopcze, ja potrzebuję powrotu wiary, a nie oczyszczania cmentarza z polnych bestii. Jestem pewny, że bez problemu poradzisz sobie z tym zadaniem sam.
Okay, so we have to wait for the night, right? For the beasts to appear. But what's your deal, specifically?
Więc dlaczego tak biegałeś?
Testowałem działanie mikstury szybkości, ale nawet z jej pomocą się zmęczyłem. Weź te mikstury, ja już się nabiegałem.
Okay, that's actually a pretty cool reward, because I really like those speed potions. We spotted the lizards on the rock shelf next to the cemetery. It's a rather unusual place for those reptiles. Maybe the novices who told me about the cemetery will know something. Maybe they will. And maybe I can actually kill them. Especially this one. It seems already wounded. Oh great. I think I can climb back though from over here, so at least I can loot one of them.
Nie ma czego plądrować.
The problem is though, if the quest was to kill them, then obviously that's going to be a little bit more complicated now that one of them has fallen into the sea. Examine the corpse.
Dziwne. Nie widziałem na tej wysepce żadnych wilków. Goblin? Sam? To bardzo dziwne. Ciało wygląda, jakby ktoś je zakopał w pośpiechu.
The bodies look clumsily and hurriedly buried, and above all they are very fresh. Strangest of all, however, I saw only one individual of each different species that are unlikely to be found here. Okay, so it seems somebody is burying animals that have been already killed in other circumstances, I presume.
Wiesz coś może o jaszczurach za cmentarzem?
Żyją tam od lat, a raczej nie są agresywne tak długo, jak nikt się do nich nie zbliża. Podobno magowie czasami potrzebują ich łusek i dlatego się ich całkowicie nie pozbywają, ale jak dla mnie, to po prostu nikomu nie chciało się tym zająć do tej pory.
Hej,
Nie chcę żadnych kłopotów. Załatw sprawę z cmentarzem, to porozmawiamy.
Okay, so I have missed something then, as far as clues are concerned. I found a statue of Innos in the cemetery chapel. I wonder why is there an effigy of another god in the graveyard of the Water Mage's monastery. What I've learned so far should be enough for Kandak, so maybe he can be like the guardian of this. Like, I assumed it's deliberate. I assumed the Water Mages still sort of recognize Innos as a god that's worthy of respect. They just shuffled him to like the side area with a smaller chapel because obviously they are primarily devoted to Archolos.
W sprawie tego cmentarza...
A ty znowu o tym. Chyba już ci coś mówiłem.
Czyli po prostu pozwolisz, by posąg Innosa był bezczeszczony?
Na cmentarzu jest kapliczka Innosa? Przecież to klasztor magów wody.
Może to jest właśnie ten znak, na który czekasz.
Możesz mieć rację. Chodźmy.
Spotkajmy się w nocy przed wejściem na cmentarz. Podobno to wtedy dochodzą z jego strony dziwne odgłosy.
Doskonale. Dzięki temu sprawiedliwość dosięgnie winnych, złapanych na gorącym uczynku. Dobrze, że jesteś. Już miałem ruszać tam sam. Chodź za mną. Nikomu nie pozwolę profanować kaplicy mojego pana.
Błagam! Nie róbcie mi krzywdy! Ja nic złego nie zrobiłem!
Sprofanowałeś kaplicę Innosa oraz cały ten cmentarz. Za takie zbrodnie należy ci się tylko jedna kara.
Well, let's listen to what he has to say in his defense.
Zaczekaj, wysłuchajmy go.
Chcesz wysłuchiwać bluźnierstw tego oprawcy?
Nie jestem żadnym oprawcą! Po prostu chciałem poćwiczyć magię przyzwania! Przepraszam, naprawdę przepraszam! To wszystko wymknęło mi się spod kontroli!
Nie próbuj się wyłgać ze swoich zbrodni.
Wait, do I know him? Obviously, I don't think he deserves to be killed for that, for just practicing summoning magic. Especially because he sounds genuinely regretful. But do I know him?
Moment, ja znam tego nowicjusza. To ty czarowałeś pod plebanią magów ognia w mieście.
Oh.
Tak, to ja! Rozważyłem wszystkie słowa twoje oraz magów i postanowiłem uczyć się w klasztorze.
Dobrze, chłopcze. Przekonaj mnie, że nie jesteś winny zarzucanych ci zbrodni.
Od zawsze fascynowała mnie magia przyzywania. Nie zastanawialiście się nigdy, skąd biorą się te wszystkie przyzwane istoty? W klasztorze jednak nikt nie chciał mi odpowiedzieć na to pytanie. Ciągle tylko magia leczenia i tworzenia eliksirów. Dlatego postanowiłem samemu poeksperymentować. Wiem, że nie powinienem i popełniłem wielki błąd. Już nigdy więcej tego nie uczynię. Tylko błagam, nie zabijajcie mnie!
To skąd te wszystkie szkielety?
Chciałem przyzwać szkielety gobliny, ale chyba coś poszło nie tak, bo gdy tylko się pojawiły, to rzuciły się w moim kierunku. Dlatego schowałem się w kaplicy.
A ludzkie szkielety?
Nie przyzywałem ich! Takie zwoje są całkowicie zakazane! To ta cała magia musiała obudzić pochowanych tutaj ludzi. Musicie mi uwierzyć!
Co o tym sądzisz?
He does sound regretful, which is a point in his favor, but the problem I have is, like, the story about how the human skeletons just appeared out of nowhere on their own is a little bit far-fetched. I hope we can still get to the bottom of this without kinda killing him.
Ta historia nie ma sensu. On musi coś ukrywać.
Oh well.
Wiedziałem, że Innos ma dla mnie jakiś ukryty cel. Całe to zwątpienie. Wyprawa do klasztoru. To wszystko było po to, bym mógł powstrzymać dziejące się tu niegodziwości. Znów czuję w moim sercu żar gorliwości do mojego pana. Porozmawiam z magami o całym zajściu. Z pewnością poczują ulgę, gdy dowiedzą się, że powstrzymaliśmy nekromantę. Gdybyś mnie kiedyś szukał, to zostanę tutaj, by strzec tej kaplicy. Dziękuję, przyjacielu. Uważaj na siebie i niech Innos macie w swojej opiece.
Yeah, I think this was the bad ending to this quest, possibly. Yeah, killed him on the spot. I disagree with that. A list. A list of what? Oh, it's another one of those items. Yeah, this is not ideal, especially because it seems to have turned Kandak back into a straight-up zealot, which, you know, I'm not super happy about this, but I'll take it. Usually, barring some extreme circumstances, I try to keep with the results, with the consequences of my actions and my decisions in quests, even if they are, you know, not exactly what I...
Słyszeliśmy odgłosy walki. Co się stało?
To długa historia, ale cmentarz jest już bezpieczny.
Pięknie, dzięki. Naprawdę ratujesz naszą przyszłość w klasztorze. Będziemy wdzięczni, jeśli nie powiesz o tym zajściu naszym przełożonym. Proszę, to w ramach podziękowania od nas obu.
Ring of Astral Power. Maximum mana plus 20. Okay, it's nothing special. To be honest, I'm not quite sure how they intend to keep this a secret, because a person died. Like, obviously there will be an investigation about that, I'm pretty sure. So it seems far-fetched to me to expect that nobody will learn of that. Okay, I have only one thing left to do, which is to explore, like, the borders of this island. It seems possibly, maybe possible to walk around, if I'm careful enough. Okay, there's someone here.
Adanusie! W końcu mnie ktoś znalazł!
Co ty tu robisz?
Nazywam się Fred i zbierałem tutaj zioła. Wiesz, najlepsze zioła można znaleźć właśnie w takich niedostępnych miejscach. Myślałem, że dam radę pokonać mój lęk przed wysokością, ale chyba się przeliczyłem.
Wyprowadzę cię stąd.
Co? Nie, chyba oszalałeś! Nie ruszam się stąd na krok! Chwila nieuwagi i będę leciał wprost w objęcia śmierci!
To jak mam ci pomóc?
Wyzwij mistrza Kusto! On będzie wiedział, co robić.
Okej.
Nowicjusz Fred wpadł w tarapaty. Utknął za budynkiem klasztoru tuż nad przepaścią i oczekuje twojej pomocy.
Znowu?
Jak to znowu?
Słowo daję, ten chłopak został zesłany przez Adanosa, by wystawić mnie na najcięższe próby. Prawie spalił stół alchemiczny, pogubił zwoje i drugi raz wlazł na tę skarpę. I mówię tylko o tym tygodniu. Dałem mu nawet specjalny amulet ochronny, ale to nic nie pomogło, bo magia niestety nie chroni przed własną głupotą.
To pomożesz mu?
Cicho, muszę się skupić. Spróbuję go tu przeteleportować. Tak, udało się. Zapytaj go, jak się czuje, bo ja już nie mam do niego sił.
Jak się czujesz?
Dobrze, nawet nie wiesz, jaką ulgę teraz czuję. Chyba powinienem jakoś cię wynagrodzić.
Nie chcę niczego w zamian. To Kusto ci pomógł, a nie ja.
Nie mów tak! Dla mnie jesteś bohaterem!
Okay, so I'm ready to leave the monastery and continue with whatever else is left for me to do in the game. But before I do that, I have an absolute crap ton of books. I have like 20 books that I bought, or maybe even more, that I bought from various traders. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to devote the rest of this episode, well, I don't know how long is it going to take, but at worst, I'm going to devote the rest of this episode to just reading all of the books that I still have in my inventory and that I have not read up until this point. So I'm going to denote it in the timestamps if you're not interested, so that you can skip it. And if it happens to take less than the remaining time to end the episode, then I'll just continue onwards and it will be noted in the timestamps as well, so if you're not interested in all of the books, you can just skip to that part. So let me get to it. There is Arcanum Marum. On the 5th day of our journey, together with Brother Alatar, I reached the shores of Archolos. Brothers Moderes and Tanaris welcomed us. Master Periandes with Brother Corax went to talk to the Lord, who bears the name of Volfzhack, which in the local tongue means son of a wolf. People showed us great hospitality, each of us a bowl of full fish. The meal was reinforcing. In return, we blessed the generous people and the problem of the prowling beast. Okay, so I guess what this is trying to tell me is that only parts of it are legible, but it should be denoted with like some kind of a graphical symbol, like, you know, the 3 dots or something, or an asterisk to indicate the missing spaces, because as is, it kind of sounds like gibberish. Like I'm trying to read it as a full sentence, but those are scraps of sentences. The problem of the prowling beast. Brother Modares decided to stay for a couple of more days to make sure that the villagers are safe. The village of Archolos reminds me of a small town, the inhabitants with the skill equal to the best carpenters of Myrtana. Volfzhack invited us to his hall. He hanged ornate tapestries under the roof. We saw weapons forged from a black. Our feet trotted on the hides of trolls and even larger terrible beasts. Master Periandes, as a token of reconciliation, gave Volfzhack a something. The chieftain proudly hanged it above and promised never to part with it. In return, he allowed us on a rocky cape on the northwestern part of the island. There we shall erect a chapel to our lord. Although wind-torn, rugged rocks of this remote cape do not hospitality as people from the island, thanks to our deep faith and determination, we built a chapel in honor of Archolos. Most of his time, Master Periandes spends on prayers and meditations on the true purpose of our arrival, and it remains hidden from the servants of the older brothers. Brother Corax believes that Volfzhack grew humble since our last visit in his hall. He believes, which he was given with, but Master Periandes constantly repeats that we should all give thanks to Archolos. Yesterday we were visited by Volfzhack and his older son, Corvan. Stripped of their garments in which they all once greeted us, our guests were clothed only in simple mantles. They wanted to learn the way of our Lord, and we, doing his bidding, filled their hearts. 2 of his older sons, the court and greatest warriors. It was a great day indeed, at the end of which our Lord himself wept tears of joy. Our master, and in truth the prior Periandes, in his wisdom, decided that my task and the task of Brother Alathar on this island are complete, and so we prepared our boats for a further journey east. We bid farewell to our brothers, and left this chronicle for my brother, Demas. Years passed and Archolos found its place in the heart of people of these islands for good. Many of them abandoned their earthly life and followed the path of righteousness and order. Thanks to the generosity of Volfzhack and his sons, the monastery, with quarters for mages and novices. Illness has struck Prior Periandes and squeezes the life out of him like a skilled farmer squeezes juice out of a bunch of grapes. We prayed for his recovery and sent for Brother Teneris, an unrivaled medic. Last night Prior Periandes passed away. Our Lord in his mercy spared him pain. Sad days have come to the Water Circle. Brothers Corax, Teneris and Modares had the something of a guiding of the High Council until a new shepherd of our stock is chosen. I shall write no more, for sorrow took away my ability to think clearly. Brother Modares, like he always does, departed on a pilgrimage across the island, searching for traces of the Lord in shrines, stone circles and places of power. Master Tenaris, however, is searching for him among the ancient ruins on the bogs. As they say, all the wisdom tends to come from after the injury, yet nobody is surprised by their decisions. The Lord puts our faith to a test indeed. Master Corax was proclaimed a new prior of the monastery. His promotion coincided with the days of mercy, during which Archolos forgives sins of sheep that went astray. We still heard no words from Brother Teneris and Modares. Everyone hopes that with the Lord's will, their journey shall end happily, and they shall return stronger in faith. In his generosity, Brother Corax donated a great deal of the monastery fortune to erect shrines of Archolos on the island. To our joy, people eagerly helped us build them. Indeed, the faith in the Lord is strong with them. Words of the endeavor have reached the ears of Brother Tenaris. A great sorrow, however, fell upon us when we heard he abandoned our brotherhood. Brother Modares also returned from this month from his own venture, but decided to take roots in the village at the basin of the Silver River. Nothing in this world lasts forever, and Adanos constantly reminds us of it. We have heard the sad news about the passing of Volfzhack, the ruler of Archolos. We conducted the last rites for his soul and put his body to eternal rest in the tomb on the western end of the island. By Volfzhack's last will, his 3 sons, Korvan, Diarut, and Fakrand, shall now rule Archolos. May merciful Adanos guide them through the path of righteousness and order. Before the body of Volfzhack was cold, his 2 sons, Yarund and Fakrand, were at each other's throats, tearing apart their father's legacy. The war they waged shook the foundations of Archolos and poisoned the hearts of its people. The age of pain and horror has begun. The age when brothers and sisters would betray each other and all teachings of Adanos would be forgotten. Seeing the futility of our attempts of negotiating with the battling brother, the prior has called for a council to look for a solution to the worsening situation on the island. The vast majority of our brothers spoke up for restraint. We did not leave, however, the victims of the war to their fate. With the permission of the High Council, Master Ladris shall build a sanitarium. Brother Ezran, who was sent to the town for necessary materials, brought us sad news. The Lord took Brother Modares. People say that he has perished in flames after saving several families from a burning house. Last night, the storm washed the cape, flooding the only path joining the mainland with the monastery. We understood this symbol in the only possible way. Beliar took hold of Archolos, and we must let him fulfill its destruction, so that the process of renewal can begin. When Beliar feasted, plunging the land into chaos and destruction, Maximus, the king of Myrtana, and the servant of Innos arrived. Like a glowing blade in the sky, he pierced through the forces of the 2 brothers, gaining advantage in their conflict, which in fact is the battle of the War of the Gods waged since the dawn of time. Farkand has asked us for help, but we must not ignore this evident sign of the Lord. Adanos, in his vast wisdom, foresaw that in this hour of trial, envoys of his brothers shall visit us, and they must be shunned. We have to wait when the time is right to bring balance and complete the cycle that was started. One day, black clouds gathered over the west, and from the bowels of the skies came ribbons of living fire, which brought death upon Myrtanian and Wolfsons alike. For many days, the inferno consumed everything it found in its way, but our prayers begged Adanos to bring rain on his suffering children. Although Yarun still took hold of the eastern citadel, the forces of Maximus were too thinned to bleed again, and so the king of Myrtana signed a treaty allowing the Wolfsons to keep their dignity and the scraps of freedom. Many people sought refuge at our gates, and we, according to the Lord's teachings, took them under our roof. And with Maximus's victory, the faith of Innos began to expand rapidly across Archolos, but people did not follow their dogmas willingly. It was instilled in them with force and fear by the king's envoys. Following the prior's advice, brothers Ladris, Arian, Gordian, and Ordius set off to the 4 corners of the island to protect with a word, and if need be with a deed, our stock from the wrath of the believers of Innos. When the new Myrtanian rule began to settle in Archolos, Brother Ezran decided to erect a temple of Adanos in the town harbor. Despite many protests of dignitaries, after long negotiations, Governor Godfrey consented to build it. He did not expect, however, that the faith of our Lord's stock would be so strong. Day after day, more and more believers would come at its doors. But Maximus's heart burned with jealousy, and so the war over the faith on Archolos was far from over. Shortly after, armed men stepped into the temple, depraved our sacred place, and seized many of the faithful. Innos himself must have seen that as evil, as he brought fire upon the town hall, whose flames could be quenched only by the soothing drops of the spring rain. Oh, it gives me 5 mana to read all of this. That's pretty cool. Many years after the death of Maximus, despite the hatred which still burned bright in people's hearts, the followers of Adanos and Innos learned how to live together in peace. When the servants of the God of Light took hold over the town, believers of the Lord of Order would crowd the villages, forests, and the shore of the sea. With that, the process of restoration was fulfilled, and the balance on Archolos was preserved. As a sign of conciliation, we decided to lay foundations for the bridge meant to rejoin the monastery to the mainland. Brothers of the High Council unanimously voted for appointing the Water Ring, the armed unit of the monastery. From the selected people, a group of warriors has been chosen. These stalwart men have shown extraordinary strength of spirit and skill. From this day forward, they shall maintain balance on Archolos. Rejoice, for Adanos blessed us with a new shepherd of our stock. Brother Regen, who has been studying for many years under the late Master Mizon, became the new leader of the monastery at the age of 33. May the Lord watch over him and guide through the meanders of balance, and protect him from the lies and wickedness of the world. Okay, so that wraps up to the present time, with Regen as a prior. I'm pretty sure I read that. Yeah, I read that already in the past. Bloodflies. Bloodflies, advice, keep a higher position, step on small stone and provoke it to fly up to the hill when you're standing on. Avoid high ledges in the confusion, you may fall down with the bloodfly and not only they can fly. River bloodfly. They fight exactly like a normal bloodfly, the only difference is that they have more stamina and a sharper sting. Swamp bloodfly. They are quite tough for their size. In contrast to other bloodflies, they prefer spitting acid and only attack with their stinger when the opponent is very close. Boars. I read that already in the past. Field Raider. Despite their size, they are not very hardy. They often feed in larger groups, but it's very easy to lure them out individually, and the individuals are virtually defenseless when charging. Forest Raiders. In contrast to field specimens, they are much tougher and can sting really hard. Their dark carapaces camouflage them perfectly in the dark thickets. You might not even notice them at night. Goblins. Often circle around prey. Do not allow yourself to be surrounded. Black goblins, the same. Goblin warriors, the same. Skeleton goblins. They live in smaller groups than other goblins, easier to lure out one at a time. Lurker. Their stride is very sluggish, but they can attack with their paws from very far away. They usually circle their opponents to strike a blow from the side. They often feed in groups, and they are extremely dangerous. When one individual occupies the attention of the prey, the other immediately proceed to attack. Sea lurkers. They live in much smaller groups than the normal counterparts, but despite this, they use very similar fighting tactics. Due to their environments, they are much more resilient and can hit extremely hard with their paws used for swimming. I read that already in the past. A giant rat, overgrown rodent, often chooses to feed on found carrion instead of fighting, even on its own kind. A swamp rat looks like a cross between a mole rat and a giant rat. Due to its fat body, it moves and fights like the former. Black rat, much larger than the other rat species, it's also much more resilient to damage. Like the other rats, it will often choose carrion over battle. I read that already in the past. This as well. Okay, I'm missing some volumes of this. So I'll keep that for later until I have all of the volumes, because then the story will be more coherent. Under the King's Banner, History of the City of Archolos. The first records under the about the town known as Holos, meaning everything that surrounds us, date back many years before Volfzhack's birth. The prefix Arch, kingly, was added when he became king, and so we can assume that the name of Archolos means kingdom. Years before, Island was home to many tribes. Volfzhack, the leader of the mountain tribe, wanted to end the era of conflict. He challenged the ruler of Archolos to a fight, which ended as soon as it started. Seeing their leader fall, the people proclaimed Volfzhack a king. During the reign of the Wolf of Archolos, the settlement consisted of nothing more than several clay-made huts and even fewer wooden houses inhabited by the rich. The stone keep of the ruler was situated in the eastern part of town, near the mountain range, when the today's Old Town is located. Up to the north from there was a fishing hamlet which in time expanded to the size of a village. Volfzhack, aware of the evident profits of seafaring, joined the seaside settlement to the town and elected a high fence around the entire agglomeration. After the conquest of Archolos by the king Maximus III, the island fell into the hand of the Myrtanians, and with it began the age of grand changes. The new ruler promised pardon to people who were once loyal to Volfzhack's sons. The king allowed them to keep their offices under one condition: they had to bow their head before Innos and consider Maximus their new ruler. The king also conducted reforms of the administration. Many solutions utilized in Vanguard were introduced in that time, although in the effect the old culture was rooted out of the city. The management vastly improved ever since. Another step the new ruler took was getting rid of the elders. In their place, a governor, together with judges and their deputies, were appointed. In time, when the new system began to function properly, the latter were delegated to other duties, and a new office of the royal scribe was created, focused on citizens' matters. Even long years after the conquest, Maximus was aware of the risk of rebellion. Thus, he decided to leave a garrison of the royal guard in Archolos until a trained unit of the city guard is created. The work of rebuilding Archolos by the Myrtanian style began with replacing gravel paths with paved roads intertwined with arcades and overpasses erected by the famous sculptor Alberto of Corinis. At the same time, the building of the town sewers began, which were meant to help residents get rid of waste. Before the Myrtanian invasion, most of the huts and houses were constructed out of wood, and thus they were vulnerable to natural forces. To increase their durability, the authorities reinforced stone buildings using timber framing method widely used across Myrtana. The changes also occurred within the old town. Due to strategic reasons, Maximus decided to tear down old quarters that belonged to the elders and replace them with a town hall. He also demolished the wooden palisades surrounding the old town and erected stone walls together with 2 gates. As the years went by, another 2 were added in the middle. In the western part of Archolos, in no more than a year, the authorities built a magnificent church of Innos next to the small chapel which remembers the days of the invasion. It is the highest building of the town to this day and serves as a significant landmark. Maximus knew that the true protection to the growing town can provide only durable fortifications, so he surrounded the entire urban area with stone walls. Later, the king also erected a white barbican protecting the western gate. Words about the king's victory on Archolos swept the seas in just a few weeks. Merchants, adventurers, and common people alike would come to the shores on their boats, cutlers, and frigates, hoping to better their financial situation. It was not long before the town streets would be teeming with outsiders from all around the world. Seeing a great number of refugees crowding in, Governor Godfrey expanded the harbor area and appointed a group of additional officials to better control the newcomers. On the other hand, to ease the hardships of their journey, he allowed them to build temporary huts near the shore, but the nobles of Archolos did not trust the foreigners and demanded to close the town borders indefinitely. Although this decision would appease one influential group of citizens, it would also plunge the entire region into an economic crisis. Godfrey had to tread lightly, as every decision was bound to risk. Although Godfrey did not want to take any side, he had a plan up his sleeve. The governor divided Archolos into districts, hoping to better control the influx of foreigners skilled in different trades. The first district was the Old Town, where only the rich citizens of Archolos were allowed to live. After that, a residential district was built for the middle class, which until today remains the largest of all, stretching between both the outer gates. Later, the craftsman district was created, which gathered people working in different trades, and the last one, the merchant district, was demarcated, which initially covered the area of today's barracks, the western part of town, and the temple district. Each of the districts was also separated with a specific building layout, designed in a way to help people move around the town. Although the governor's plan had its merits, some openly opposed it. The indigenous residents accused authorities of segregating people on those of the better stock, foreign, and the worse, local. And they were partially right. Nobles simply refused to breathe the same air as the commoners. Despite dividing the town into separate districts, foreigners were still allowed in the harbor, each with a story to tell, experiences and prejudices. An overpopulated shore more and more resembled a pot that could spill at any moment. Determined to stop the uncontrollable influx of outsiders, the governor built a wall on the outer border, with the harbor guarded by royal guards. His decision angered the foreigners, who started a revolt that lasted many days. Although the uprising was brutally quenched, it was never forgotten. The outsiders tried to make their ends meet in any ways possible. Smuggling and uncontrollable trade of swampweed flourished on Archolos, which forced Maximus to put an embargo on its distribution. The line between the rich and poor was more and more visible, and the people's trust in authorities was forever tarnished. It was the time when the faith in Innos weakened among the commoners, and the religion of Adanos increased. Water mages took advantage of this tendency and built a chapel in the harbor, which to this day remains open for the sick and the poor. After the unsuccessful conquest of Contir and Glenvir, the king returned to the mainland and took with him almost the entire army. This decision was met with mixed feelings from the inhabitants of Archolos. The locals were afraid of another rebellion. Foreigners, on the other hand, saw their chance for gaining more rights. The governor made sure all of them were content. From the selected group of citizens, Godfrey appointed a unit of the city guard, tasked to maintain the law and order after the king's departure. Soon after, the barracks were built in the middle of the town. Regular guardsmen and elite companies of crossbowmen became an armed wing of Archolos. The governor also simplified the way of obtaining citizenship by foreigners. Instead of waiting long years for their turn, all they had to do was convince several influential people in the town about their usefulness to society. Eventually, envoys of many guilds and trade companies began to invest their wealth into local markets. There was plenty of work with transporting goods, as well as in sale. Thus many new opportunities were opened for citizens and foreigners alike. Godfrey should have listened to the words of an old scribe, Holger. Never trust a merchant. Give them a finger and they'll chop off your hand. Not for what you hold in it, but for that ring you're wearing. But Holger died, and soon after Godfrey, both of unspecified illness. The new governor, Karsten, despite high hopes, for he was of noble blood, was a mediocre administrator and even worse politician. He did nothing to resolve the troll problem in the sewers. and as a result, the people began to spill all their filth right onto the streets, as they do to this day on Londram. Some began to suspect that the governor was but a puppet in the hands of the trade guilds, which have begun gaining more and more power in the town. The doubts were quelled the moment Karsten realized that he no longer needed the support of the town council, whose members he drove out of the town hall. The governor befriended, however, a group of merchants with a Myrtanian trade magnate, Delaverd. If the stories are true, during a night-long libation, Karsten signed a treaty appointing the Eastern League, which led to declaring an open rebellion against the crown. Although at first it could appear that Karsten fell victim to his own fondness for beverages, the document was signed, and in time the governor began to realize what he had done. The Eastern League had become a fact. Banners of Myrtana disappeared from the town hall building, walls and the city gates, and in their place appeared a sign of triple knot, symbolizing the islands of Archolos, Londram and Kontir, which first revolted against the kingdom. After them, Laran, Eritos and smaller islands of the new lands of the Eastern Archipelago seceded from Myrtana. Patrols of the city guard were replaced by groups of mercenaries, serving not law but coin. Karsten understood what he had done with a single swing of his quill, however it was too late to stop the chain of events. In his grief, the governor threw himself from the highest window of the town hall to save his name from an entire shame. The king of Myrtana, Mandred, decided to quench the rebellion by sending a well-equipped armed force across the sea. Although the war only grazed Archolos, hastily formed units of men-at-arms laid waste to the countryside, murdering, pillaging and burning whatever they found on their way. Having lost contact with most of the harbor towns, the fleet of the Eastern League was defeated, and the organization itself dissolved. King Mandred brought peace to the rebelled colonies and rebuilt the administrative system. He also appointed the only legal merchant union in Myrtana, the Araxos Guild. One of the first guild houses emerged on Archolos in the western part of the merchant district. Many years later, Governor Morris allowed the guild chairman to build quarters for the mercenaries, people who sought fame and fortune in the service of the organization. After the fall of the Eastern League, patrols of the city guard returned to the streets, but their old prestige did not. They lacked discipline and equipment, which made the people doubt the efficiency of the order in Archolos. Only today, under Captain Roderick, the city guard had begun to regain its respect. Years passed and Archolos managed to overcome storms that crashed against it. Its people, however, no longer resemble their forefathers. They are proud and hardened in the fires of history, and ready to face the winds of war, which slowly blow closer to their home. Okay, that's pretty interesting that there was a recent rebellion against Myrtana. Like, it was never mentioned so far in the game, and you'd think that's a pretty crucial information. You'd think that would have come up. Silver Court, Volume 1, a book about the beginnings of the village of Silbach. For many years, scholars and simple men could not decide what is the true treasure of Archolos. Some say it's the wine. In the company of this beverage, countless treaties were signed, kings crowned and wars declared. Others say it is the gold. After all, due to the merchant contracts, the island is now called the Vanguard of the East. For me, however, the treasure has always been silver. Legends tell that many years before robbers, traders and lords tore apart the goods of this island, mountain caves were teeming with the immense source of silver. Eventually, the greed of some foreign king led to a landslide, due to which silver ore fragments fell into a creek below. In such a way, people started to name it the Silver Creek, and in its basin the village of Silbach was built. old merchant documents from the period confirm that the village was a place for unloading silver, there was so much of the raw material abound that people would call Silbach the Silver Court. Raftsmen would carry immeasurable amount of the silver ore to town and south of the river. It was silver that made Silbach flourish and turned it in one of the one of the key transit points on Archolos. The earliest records about Silbach suggest that the village could be built in the period following the arrival of Maximus III, king of Myrtana. According to oral traditions, however, the settlement existed already before the time of the coming of the ironclad warriors from beyond the Great Sea. Presumably, Silbach was then nothing more than a bunch of huts which, due to the flourishing trade, grew into the size of the regular village. After Maximus's invasion, the town of Archolos was turned into a ruin, and its reconstruction to a Myrtanian-styled city lasted many years. At this time, Silbach, situated in the center of the island, became the main trade point on the island. Although due to the king's reforms, the older old order was rooted out from the town, traditions found their way to flourish outside it. Despite being a part of the kingdom of Myrtana, Silbach has become a refuge for local habits. There is no doubt that through nurturing memories of the old times, villagers speak so proudly of their land and crops it gives birth to, but they also scorn the townfolk, who they call a rotten fruit of traitors and foreign aggressors. One day I met a farmer, a mage and an alchemist. They all had their theory explaining the fertility of the soil among Silbach. The farmer claimed the villagers learned how to tame the forces of nature with their hard work. The mage, however, believed that the gratitude belongs to Adanos, who in his generosity regularly brings rain to the fields. The alchemists, on the other hand, stated that the volcanic soil increased the growing of crops. Perhaps only one of them was right, all or no one. Each of them, however, agreed that sooner or later Silbach would become torn apart by different factions battling over its wealth. Looking at the village today, I can say that they were right. Araxos Guild ceaselessly sends their scouts to herd wild beasts near the village, so that later they can gloriously come to the villagers' rescue and bound them with lifetime contracts. Wolf's sons, however, tend to threaten and remind them about historical affiliations. This jostling is carefully watched by Godfrey, the governor of Archolos, who introduced the vassal system. From the most honored people of Silbach, he chose a man whom he gave the noble title and the village together with the areas around it. The price for such a gift, however, was meant to be boundless service to the crown. Sir Bodrin, also called Nestor, was the first ruler of Silbach. As the governor expected, he faithfully served the authorities of the town, often fulfilling the whims of the local townsfolk while disregarding the needs of his own people. Some say it was the reason why no chronicle ever mentioned his name. After Bodrin's death, his son, Sir William, took the rulership over Silbach. On the first day of his governance, he visited the church in the town where he had sworn service to Archolos and Myrtana. His rule was a constant struggle for keeping the balance between the needs of townsfolk and villagers. One summer, William was taken by the plague, which broke out on the island. His son Ramsay was by then but a youngling, but he remained under the custody of his mother. Thus, Lady Aldona, also called the Iron Lady, took the control over Silbach, and no ruler would ever come close to her grandeur and determination. Despite the governor's orders, Aldona built a large manor in Silbach, renewed the chapel of Adanos, and erected a watermill solely for the villagers. For this and other reasons, she was brought to the town hall to explain herself. But whenever Lady Aldona spoke, the governor and his lapdogs beside her, the governor and his lapdogs looked beside her like a bunch of scared little rats. Lady Aldona ruled Silbach wisely, and many people speak highly of her even today. No lord before her had enough courage to stand in opposition to the governors and fight for the good of the people of Silbach. After Ramsay came of age, his mother, until the end of her days, remained at his side, advising him in political and economical matters. So Ramsay took the place of Lady Aldona when he finished 24 Springs and rules the village till this day. The people of Silbach, however, don't find in him the strength of his mother, nor the peace of his father. Year after year, he is more like his grandfather, both in appearance and in character. Today, Governor Maurice decided to take advantage of Ramsay's passion for hunting and allowed him to organize yearly ventures across the island. Having tasted lavish town life, year after year, Ramsay more and more scarcely visits his home village. Many people of Silbach wished to rise against Ramsay, but the governor had a plan for it. In the place of the lord, a village elder named Albin stepped in. His iron rules successfully quenched voices of rebellion. The question remains, however, for how long? The mischievous Nordyek and the greedy king. This summer, like the one before it, and even as the elders say, the summer before that, the crops were not big and fish were not biting well. The sky was pouring down day by day and night by night, and on this sorrowful hour, a foreign king has arrived on the shore with hundreds of his men, armed as for war. He was greedy and haughty man, and the life of others meant as much as the life of meatbags to be crushed under his feet. And so the king of slaves got off his crimson boat over the heads of his servants. He breathed heavily, for he was a man of grand posture. He looked around on the left and right, hoping to see a song-worthy battle. But instead of people preparing for a fight, the warlord saw only a scrawny old man and 3 younglings behind him, clutching on wicker baskets filled with gifts. The old man hoped that the tributes would suffice the foreign king, and that he would refrain from violence. The proud sovereign looked at the gifts laid before him, snorted with contempt, and tossed them away with his fat hand. He demanded that each of the younglings bring him a greatest treasure of the island, and if not, and if he wouldn't be happy over them, he promised that the darkness of Morgard itself shall fall upon them. The first youngling approached the foreign king, and with trembling hands offered him a necklace made of polished amber. The sovereign climbed down his slaves like a fat mole rat from his den. He then yanked the necklace from the boy's hands and tried to put it on his head, but at the first attempt, the trinket broke and ambers fell one after the other into the sand. The wrathful one grabbed the boy in half and choked him to death with the strap left in his hands. The second youngling offered the cruel one best wine on the island. Impatient to wait until the boy poured his drink into a goblet, the foreign king snatched the jug and drank it eagerly, but as soon as he emptied it, he threw it up. Then the conqueror angered greatly and ordered his grunts to fill the boy with wine until it spilled out of his ears. The third youngling, however, brought no gift with him, so the foreign king pointed at one of his lapdogs to punish him for this insult. When the shadow of death hung cruelly above the poor boy, he promised to lead the greedy king to the true treasure of the land. Amused but also curious, he rushed after the youngling, and both disappeared into the darkness of a mountain grotto. After delving through the twisted salt-soaked corridors, the foreign king reached the end of the cave, but no treasure was to be seen. The terrible one then angered greatly at the boy, grabbing him by the throat, and shook, nearly choking the whole life out of him. The youngling then pointed with a shaking finger at the silver rocks glimmering in the darkness, and the greedy king rejoiced 100-fold. Soon the arrogant one called all of his men and ordered them to dig as long as the reaches of the mountain would be extracted. The boy disappeared, but the king barely noticed, for the visions of immeasurable treasures and power blotted his eyes completely. After the last rock barring the entrance to the silvery reward was cast aside, something swooshed, howled, and rumbled in the depths, and a gigantic mass of water washed away the small and baffled king fool and his cowardly grunts. And so the story comes to an end. Nordyek the imp punished the foreign king, and the Silver Creek flows on the island to this day. Okay, I've read this already in the past. Types of damage. Since the dawn of time, humans have tried to contend with all sorts of beasts, including other humans who try to take from them what they have won so far. The key to success in this fight is knowing the different types of damage, defense, and their interrelationships. The most common type of damage you will experience is edge damage, otherwise known as damage from blades. These come from all types of swords, spears, and axes, as well as claws and fangs of monsters. Its overall usefulness is very high, but in a few fights it gives us significant advantage. The next type of damage is blunt damage. Such damage is done by mace, hammer, fists, and many monsters that strike with a large paw or head. Blows are especially effective against heavy armor, bones, or boulders. Ranged weapons always cause projectile wounds. Like edge wounds, they have an overall high utility, but in few cases they are practically useless. Arrows bounce off of stone or even thick leather, and hitting a skeleton bone is not easy either. The hardest type of damage to describe by far is flight, wind, and fall damage. This is a very diverse category that includes attacks that are not very common. No armor yet has been created to protect against those types of wounds. Each creature has its own resistance to them. For humans, learned acrobatics might prove the only additional protection, as it allows them to properly distribute the energy of a blow. Usually, the larger and heavier the creature, the greater the resistance, and light and bony creatures are extremely susceptible to them. The next type of damage is magic damage, which comes directly from spells. Additionally, most spells also cause an elemental reaction, which can weaken or strengthen the damage, depending on the creature that is subjected to it. Water can shatter stone into tiny pieces, and fire can incinerate the undead, and lighting can instantly kill flying creatures. Poison and acid damage from certain toxic creatures work in a similar fashion. The magic damage associated with a specific element also seems to be affected by weather. During a downpour, the power of spells related to lighting increases significantly, while the effectiveness of fire spells decreases. What? That's very interesting. Don't underestimate the weakness of a certain magic. Lighting, for example, doesn't need a downpour to do massive damage to water. The last type of damage is fire damage, and that should not be confused with fire elemental reaction mentioned earlier. Fire defense allows you to protect yourself from flames coming from a non-magical source, such as a fire lizard's breath, as well as from burning effects caused by being hit by a fire spell. Although these are very rare types of damage, you should be adequately prepared, as they can kill you in a blink of an eye. Corridors of Vardhal I have read already. The mastery of the Vardhal armorers. Many pages are completely unreadable due to their age, but there are no armorers in the world as skilled as the masters of Vardhal. From the hands of those craftsmen came an armor so strong that even a rushing axe... What? That sentence makes no sense. It should be the other way round. It should be came out an armor so strong that it can even stop a rushing axe, but because the way it's phrased now, it is as if somebody expects a rushing axe to protect them from this armor, which is stupid. I know what they mean, but the way it's phrased makes no sense whatsoever. There are two secrets to this art. The first is the experience that has been passed down through the ages, so that each blow of the hammer only strengthens the steel, not weakens it. The second, but no less important, is the highest quality material. In order to turn iron into a truly durable material, a nugget of silver and magic ore each will be required. The interior must be made of leather that is comfortable to touch and yet durable. One of them you will find on a beast as massive as a tower, the other on a black monster that likes honey. So one of them is a troll skin and the other is a black bear skin. Tie the armor with the tongue which the heat of the forge does not frighten, and strengthen all immovable joints with the horn of the Night Hunter. In the end, everything should be polished with the only stone hard enough, alive and dead at the same time, grey like the rocks of the Wolf's Den. Liquid Gold, Volume 1, a book about the history, production and characteristics of the wine. For some people, wine is an essential drink, for peasants and lords alike. For others, it is an important part of their daily ritual. As Cynred, a long-time advisor to the King Mandred, rightfully observed, the role and importance of wine are changing as fast as the opinion of politicians. Famous for their distrust of strangers, the people of Glenver tend to drink it a lot. Not without reason, they have adopted the adage, "Iron can be known through fire, men can be known through wine." Londramians, on the other hand, like to seal their meetings with wine. In time, wine brought the interest of medics and barbers, for whom the drink became almost synonymous with medicine. The latter liked its analgesic properties so much that they assured their clients, after a cup of red, you will feel neither iron nor fire. Alchemists, on the other hand, like to repeat a mantra. After a cup, you will take away the pain. After a cup, you will take away the pain from the body. After 2, you will soothe the soul. After 3, you will knock at the gates of Innos. They were first to discover that consuming large amounts of wine can have a detrimental effect to human health. Although people began to be aware of the harmfulness of wine abuse, in no way did this knowledge affect wine consumption. When someone happened to overdo, an adage popular in the time of King Maximus was invoked. He who drinks wine sleeps well, he who sleeps well is free from sin, he who does not sin goes to the bosom of Innos. Philius, the Archmage of Fire from the monastery of the island of Erythros, took this sentence to heart. The priest discovered that this beverage, when prepared properly, has certain magical properties. True to his word, he was so engrossed in his research that he and his brother locked the gates of the sanctuary for 7 full days, during which the High Council partied like a group of jesters. Shortly after those events, the Archmages of Vanguard recalled Philius, and wine arriving to the monasteries began to be diluted with water. Despite that, abbeys continued to produce wine. It was not until Archmage Vidger issued an edict under which he ordered the priests to consume as much wine to have the strength to stand on their feet during service. The author of the First Power, Geber, argues that wine is a gift from heaven, belittling the invaluable role of winemakers in the production of this drink. While it is undoubtedly a complicated process, I will present you with 4 key steps that will prove the credit goes to men first and foremost. A skilled vintner must know when to pick and when to leave the fruit. If he picks them too early, they may turn inedible and the taste of the wine will be tart. If he picks them too late, the taste will be too sweet and the grapes will simply rot. Pick one grape from each bush and taste it, and then you will know if you have the right time. After you pick the grapes, place them in a tub where you mash them. Do this carefully and patiently, and the fruit will certainly thank you by releasing its juices. Then put the must into a vat covered with sheepskins for a few days to start the fermentation process. From time to time, push the skins and twigs up to the surface. Once you think the wine is starting to get strong and clear, pour it through strainers into an oak barrel and seal tightly for 1 or 2 springs. After that time, you can pour the wine into more barrels and wait half of that time to achieve the desired taste, color and texture. Although the production of wine is dependent on the skills and experience of winemakers, it is not uncommon for their efforts to fail and for the beverage prepared for months or years to rot. Many methods have been devised to deal with the acidity of the wine. A popular method to preserve wine is to add sulfur to it. If the stories are true, a merchant called Clement of Sendar came up with this idea and accidentally poured a stock of 20-year-old beverage into a barrel filled with sulfur. When he opened the lid many months later and saw what he had done, he had realized that the taste and the texture remained the same. Another method favored by Myrtanian winemakers involves pouring a thick layer of oil Molra tallow on top of the aging wine. This method is also used for sealing bottles with wine, which necks are additionally protected with wax. Before pouring the wine into barrels, many winemakers add honey, herbs or spices to improve the taste. However, there are con artists who cleverly use this procedure to hide the nasty taste of cheap wine, which is often nothing more than a byproduct of the maceration process. Knowledge of making and preserving wine is often not enough to keep it from spoiling. Many merchants, however, have no qualms about selling bottles of stale wine. Valerio, the owner of the vineyard on Archolos, used to comment on the state of affairs with the words, "You won't believe how much of that shit they sell to people at the markets." Peter of Montilia believed that the process of wine making starts not with the harvesting, but from planting the bushes. He proved that the volcanic soil has unique properties and that plants grow faster than those planted anywhere else in the world. Although like an exemplary Montilian, he practiced using a row system with supports for the bushes. He suggested leaning the vines against trees as an alternative method. This is because they are supported to ensure the free and natural development of the plant. A southern island winemaker, Rarima, wrote in her diary valuable observations about the work of the vineyard itself. She believed that the stage of crushing the fruit should be preceded by washing the vessel with salted water. This treatment was proved to purify the wine, making it excellent for medicinal purposes. If you ask a winemaker about the cradle of wine, you will hear stories about the picturesque hills and the valleys of southern Myrtana, but if you tell him to point you to the beating heart of this drink, he will say it's Archolos. For many years, the two local winemakers fought for supremacy in the Archolos wine market. The first of them, Valerio, has always produced strong and clean and noble wines. The second one, Arazola, on the other hand, produced lighter drinks with a sweeter, fruity bouquet. In a constant pursuit for customers, both families duplicated or improved the ideas of the opponent, thus losing the essence of their own wines. These actions, however, contributed to the implementation of many revolutionary ways of wine production and in turn strengthened the wine market on the island. During one of those evening tastings at the local hostelry, the owners of both vineyards finally decided to bury the hatchet. After much negotiation and many emptied goblets of wine, they agreed that the island was big enough for both of them. Have I read this? Despite a pack of wolves following our trail, we made it to the gates of Vardhal without much difficulty. Bardos spoke the truth about the size of the fortress. Before fire and time turned it to ruins, it must have been impressive. I helped Keran set up camp in the case the beast crossed the bridge. We won't take a step further today. Besides, we have to wait for Sevinus and the rest of the tools anyway. I'm the one standing guard today. I just hope it doesn't rain. And there is some wine left in the bottle. A Testament of the Wolf, an unbound book. It must be many years old. Volfzhack divided the land between 3 sons before his death. Korvan, the eldest, received the town. Yarund was given the stronghold to the east and west. Farkand took the Silver River Basin. The 3 brothers sealed their father's will with these words of an oath. What once stood united, on 3 was divided. At the darkest hour we shall dispel the shadow. Brother stands by brother, and enemies fall times another. But the drums of war once more sounded in the fields and forests, and the promise of the eternal order was just an illusion. Brothers stood against brother, freshly harvested crops were turned to ashes, and sons and daughters were torn from their mothers' cradles. And so Adanos wept mournfully, bringing rain onto the land, yet the people continued to wound each other. Then the Gracious One awoke their hearts from stone, and angered the sea, which separated the grain from the chaff, surrounding the faithful with a soothing sheen of infinite blue. Okay, and I read that before, right? My father was right, this place is cursed, blah blah blah, no turning back. Yeah, this is a diary from Vardhal. Okay, so I'm done. It was kind of interesting, especially the recent rebellion against Myrtana. Like, that kind of caught me by surprise. Actually, kind of the fact that for example, lighting spells are more effective during rain is something that kind of boggles my mind. Like, that's such a weird sort of hidden small mechanic. Like that won't actually impact the game. I struggle to think how you could deliberately plan anything around that, but that's just interesting. Anyway, this episode has been long enough, so I'm going to save. And end it for now. That's all for this one, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.